Monster Hunter World provides hunters with numerous tools and weapons to take on the beasts that roam the world. With each weapon comes a unique set of moves and mechanics that hunters must master. With training and knowledge of these, a hunter can decimate the monstrous foes that lie in their way. I'm Darcblade, and in this video we're going to bring you a hunter's guide to the switch axe. The switch axe is a technical weapon, able to switch between two modes, axe and sword. In Axe mode, a hunter will deal standard damage without having to rely on any resource system. Axe mode attacks are fairly long reaching as well, and are simple to use. On the flip side though, the sword mode of the switch axe allows the hunter to deal fast, high damaging attacks, but relies on a switch gauge file system, which means a hunter cannot attack with the switch axe sword indefinitely. Nonetheless though, a hunter that utilizes both forms of the switch axe can ultimately dish out a lot of damage. But anyway, let's get into the episode and talk about the basic moves of the switch axe. First we'll talk about the axe mode. Now you can draw the weapon and attack by moving the left stick and pressing triangle. This will do a simple side slash. Triangle on its own will also do a side slash, which is done on the spot. And circle is a wild swing. That is a 2-hit move for a single press of the button. Next is forward slash, which is done by moving the left stick and then pressing triangle. Next is triangle and circle, which does a raising slash. Next is the axe fade slash, which is done by pressing back and circle during the middle of an axe combo. And finally is R2, which allows the weapon to morph from axe to sword mode. This brings us on to the very basic moves of the sword form of the switch axe. Now you can do a draw and attack with the sword form of the switch axe by pressing R2. This will do an overhead slash. Triangle also performs an overhead slash, which is done on the spot. Circle is a double slash, which is again a 2-hit move. And triangle and circle is an elemental discharge. Elemental discharge can then be followed up by pressing the triangle multiple times to perform an elemental discharge finisher. Also, while in sword form, you can perform a heavenward flurry. This is done by pressing circle a second time after the double slash. So this would be circle, circle. Also, whilst you're in the middle of a sword combo, if you were to press back in R2, you would perform a downwards fade slash, transforming the sword form into axe form once more. And finally, while in sword form, if you press R2 again, it will switch the weapon from sword mode to axe mode. But anyway, let's move away from the very basics of the weapon to talk about the unique mechanics of the switch axe. The main unique mechanic of the switch axe is the fact that it's two weapons in one. A large two-handed axe and a large two-handed sword. Now while I mentioned that the axe form is pretty basic when it comes to its functions, the sword form on the other hand is a lot more complicated. Together they form a symbiosis of a weapon that a hunter can use to their advantage. This allows a hunter to potentially deal out large amounts of burst damage when an opportunity is right, and still be able to provide a source of damage whilst waiting for that opportunity. Now the file system is where things get complicated with the switch axe. The file system is indicated underneath your sharpness bar in the top left of the screen. Now there are two parts to this file system. There's the switch gauge, which is the bar in the middle. This will deplete as you perform sword attacks, eventually restricting you to axe form should this meter deplete, and have to remain there until the green bar fills up past the white indicator of the bar, which is about at the hilt of the switch axe sword icon. However, this will fill up over time. You can also help yourself out should you be forced into axe form by pressing R2 to allow your hunter to actually reload the switch axe. This will instantly refill a large portion of this gauge. And then you have the file system, which is the sword icon behind the actual meter. As you deal damage with your sword attacks, the outline of the sword icon will start filling up, start glowing green. As you deal more and more damage, this will eventually fill up the entire sword icon. Once this happens, a player will enter a amped state. This amped state increases all your attacks in sword mode. If you're a switch axe user, you should be aiming to get this maxed out as quickly as possible and deal as much efficient damage as you can whilst it's active. This amped state is where the majority of your burst damage will come from. Also, while the switch axe sword is amped, you'll also gain access to another move. Should you perform a elemental discharge whilst your sword is amped, your hunter will latch on to a monster. Although this doesn't count as a mount, it looks like one. Afterwards, the hunter will jam the switch axe sword into the monster, and if you should continue to press triangle, you will perform a zero-sum discharge. This causes large amounts of damage to the monster, but will eat up a good chunk of the switch axe switch gauge, normally reverting you back into axe form. However, it should be noted that if you are forced back into axe form whilst your sword is amped, it won't cancel the amped state. It means you'll have to either reload your weapon or just wait until it recharges. Hopefully then you can switch back into sword mode and still get a few hits in on a monster whilst your weapon is still amped. Also be aware the weapon won't stay amped forever. It will eventually over time revert back to its unamped state. in which case you have to start the process once more. Now, one thing you should be aware about the zero-sum discharge is that you can activate it prematurely by just simply releasing triangle. Don't press it anymore and your hunter will cause an explosion. Whilst maybe not the most damaging, it's nonetheless an option, especially because a hunter can be knocked off of a monster whilst performing this move. Now, on top of that as well, there are different files available to the switch axe. These are all dependent on which switch axe you actually craft yourself. For the most part, there are 6. There's power files, which boost the attack power of weapons. There's power element files that boost the attack power and natural elemental or status attribute of the weapon. There's dragon files that allows your attacks to deal bonus dragon elemental damage. There's poison files that allows your attacks to deal bonus poison status damage. There's paralysis files, which allows your attacks to deal bonus paralysis status damage. And then finally, there's exhaust files that allows your attacks to deal bonus stun or knockout and exhaust status damage. Of course, which one you want to go for all depends on your playstyle. On the most part, the power files seem to be the best at the moment, but the others are not without their uses. Also be aware that the file effects only really apply to your sword attacks with the switch axe. But anyway, let's move away from the unique mechanics of the switch axe to talk about the more useful combos for the weapon. Now, in axe form there are 2 useful combos. The first is triangle, 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 triangle. 4 triangles basically. This allows your hunter to deal moderate damage with the axe. However, this combo can come in useful as it has quite a reach, able to hit high up monsters who are either flying or whose weak points are high up. However, this combo is low on the priority list. The next axe combo you should maybe consider utilizing is the wild swing combo, which is done by hammering the circle button. This will cause your hunter to stay on the spot and swing wildly with the switch axe's axe form. This is probably the highest damaging combo of the axe form of the switch axe. However, this combo will eat up your stamina, so you cannot perform this combo indefinitely. However, once you notice your stamina is about to run out, or if you have enough energy on your file and switch gauge, then you should press R2 to immediately convert the sword from the wild swing combo into sword form. You can then immediately continue on attacking a monster with sword combos. But when it comes to sword combos, what are the best? Now, Monster Hunter does suggest the following combo, which is triangle, 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 circle, circle, then triangle and circle for the elemental discharge, and then repeatedly press triangle for that elemental discharge finisher. But this isn't always the most efficient combo to perform. Whilst yes, it is good and it does look good, it's not necessarily the best one. Now, when it comes to the sword, the combo you'll want to use first in order to max out your file and thus enter the amp state is just simply circle, perform the double slash, and then follow that up immediately with an elemental discharge. This is normally enough to allow your hunter to enter the switch axe amp state. However, it does use up a bit of the switch gauge, so you won't have a full switch gauge to assault a monster with afterwards, but this is something to expect when using the switch axe. Anyway, once you are in an amp state, probably the highest damaging combo to do is triangle 3 times, then circle, and then back to triangle 3 times and circle again. The reason being is if you press circle a second time, you'll perform the Heavenward Flurry, and whilst it can be argued that it does do more damage than some of the triangle and circle swings, it nonetheless has a long wind-up time and animation. Anyway, if you have enough time and you have enough meter in your switch gauge, then you can interrupt the combo at any time by performing an elemental discharge again with triangle and circle, and then performing a zero-sum discharge on a monster. But anyway, let's move on to some of the aerial and environmental moves available to the switch axe. Whilst in axe form you have 3 options. Should you jump off a ledge and press triangle, you'll perform a pretty standard jumping slash. The same goes for if you decide to run up a wall, so if you sprint towards a wall with mushrooms or such on it, and then press triangle afterwards, you'll do another jumping slash. And then finally, if you should be sliding down a hill, if you press triangle, you'll perform a wide arcing jumping sweep. Now, on the other hand, while in sword form, should you jump off a ledge with your weapon sheathed and press triangle, you'll perform a jumping slash. Same for if your weapon is drawn. However, if your weapon is drawn and you jump off a ledge, you can also have the option to press triangle and circle to do an elemental discharge. Once you land on the ground, you can continue to press triangle to perform an elemental discharge finisher. However, if you should be in an amped state and you do this, you will latch onto a monster. If you're running up a wall and decide to press R2, you will do a jumping slash with the sword mode of the switch axe. And then finally, if you're sliding down a hill and press R2, you'll perform a jumping rising slash that will cause your hunter to rise into the air. Afterwards, you'll have 2 options available to you. You can perform a second follow-up jumping slash attack by pressing triangle, or you can perform a jumping elemental discharge by pressing triangle and circle. This is pretty much the same as when you jump off a ledge with your sword drawn. So if you are in an amped state, you can potentially latch onto a monster with it. Now, all of these moves, except for the elemental discharges, allow you to potentially mount a monster. This gives you a great opportunity to deal damage to the monster, also stunning it for a brief time. With the switch axe as well, should you successfully be able to ride a monster for long enough, you'll perform an elemental discharge on top of the monster. This gives you a great opportunity to fill up the switch axe file to enter the amped state. After which, when it explodes, once the monster falls, you should have almost a full switch gauge to unleash a whole host of amped attacks on the monster. Now for the additional information and recaps. Now remember, as I mentioned, if there is an opening in an enemy's attack, then this could be an option to reload the switch gauge file manually with R2. However, this can only be possible if you've been restricted to only axe mode. Also, you should be aware that whilst you have the switch axe drawn, whether it be in axe mode or in sword mode, players have access to a sidestep with a direction in X. This can help reposition yourself and counter some of the movement issues that the switch axe has. And finally, one thing you should be aware of is that whilst you're attacking with your sword, the weapon has a natural mind's eye effect. For those of you who don't know, mind's eye means that the sword attacks will not bounce off of the monster's hide or over hard parts. Now whilst this means that you don't really have to worry about what part of the monster you should attack, you should still try to focus on the weaker points for maximum damage. Now let's go over the pros and cons of the switch axe. First of all, the weapon has a fairly decent reach, able to hit most monsters, so use this to your advantage. It means that you don't always have to be up close in a monster's face to still hit them. The next major pro is the sword mode's file system. With this and becoming amped, you're able to enhance your damage, allowing you huge burst damage potential. Waiting for the right moment to strike with this can be key to bringing down a monster. It is also the area you need to master to be good with the switch axe. Try to always get the file system into its amped state as quickly as possible, and then when an opportunity is right, unleash hell with the fast combos you can perform with the sword mode of the switch axe. And finally, the next major pro is that whilst in sword mode, you have mind's eye, so the weapon will not bounce off of a monster's hide. But on the flip side, the greatest weaknesses of the weapon are that whilst in sword mode, you are quite slow when it comes to movement. Whilst the strikes and attacks are fast, your hunter is not. So to counteract this, try to utilise the hopping and sidestep mechanics. And the other major con for the weapon is the switch gauge, unfortunately. Whilst the file system could be considered a pro, the switch gauge on the other hand is probably the biggest con, because it does restrict your ability to use sword mode. But if this wasn't here, then the weapon maybe could be considered too powerful. Now overall, the switch axe is a great weapon if you're focused on dealing a lot of damage in a small window of time. Whilst yes, it can perform damage constantly, it is nonetheless about building up the energy of your file system and waiting for the right opportunity to strike. Once you have entered the amp state, you have enough energy left in your switch gauge, then the burst damage potential of the switch axe is immense. With that in mind, try to wait for the right windows of opportunity. Even when a monster is knocked out, stunned, or trapped is best. The combos as well with the weapon are fluid and easy to perform. When it comes to all these combos and that, you have to be aware that some monsters, especially the hyper aggressive ones, will not freely allow you to just simply stand there and hit them. Most of the time they can knock you over, interrupting you, or worse. So as you're attacking a monster, consider interrupting your combo with a well-timed dodge or sidestep in order to keep yourself alive. If you're a player who likes a playstyle of complexity and resource management, then the switch axe is definitely worth a look. Whilst its sustained damage is not the best, its burst damage potential once you are in your amped state is a joy to behold. Now remember that the damage numbers and effectiveness of the weapons can vary depending on numerous factors, from gear, buffs, monster defenses, and even the environment. All of these can help or hinder a weapon's performance. With that in mind, learning as much as you can about the basics of the weapon will help achieve a successful hunt. Anyway, I hope this video has been informative, and until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you a hunter's guide to the switch axe in Monster Hunter World. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.